Hello, everyone. This is a video for lesson 2.1. It should be a pretty quick one. I think it's mostly review. There's just always with this type of stuff, there's just little things you got to pay attention to. Make sure you don't make little silly mistakes. We're looking at integers and absolute value. So integers are just basically your counting numbers, but negative, positive, and also zero. So there's no fractions or decimals, anything like that. You know what negative and positive numbers are. Absolute value and opposites are something we'll go over in some of the examples here. But let's get started on just kind of a mini word problem. It's not even really too much of a word problem, but looking at graphing and ordering integers. So the table shows low temperatures for 5 days, which day had the lowest temperature. So the thing with negative numbers, now with positives, you know what numbers are big and what are small. But with negatives, what you basically kind of have to get in your head is that the bigger a negative number looks, actually the smaller it is. Okay. So it says here to find which day had the lowest temperature, graph each integer on a number line. Now you might, if this was just the question and didn't say you had to graph it, you probably don't have to do it, especially a problem like this. When we live in Minnesota, we're used to negative numbers with temperature and stuff like that. So you could probably look at this chart and be able to see what's the coldest day. Okay, we're used to that here. But if negative numbers have always been a problem or something with you, the way you do it, and you can make sure, is you graph them on a number line. So here we have 0, goes up to 10 positive, goes backwards 10 negative, and you just start plotting the points. The farther a number is on the left side, the smaller or lower value it has. So -8 is the smallest number here, or in this case, the lowest temperature, the coldest day. Okay. There's going to be some problems where it will just give you a list of numbers and it'll tell you to order these numbers. Most of the time, they're going to say least to greatest. Make sure you read the directions though, and it's not the other way around. Okay, but almost always it's going to say least to greatest. So what you do with these, and they've done it here for you, is you set up a number line. If you need to, you might not need to do this. You might be able to look at these and do it just fine. But if you're stuck on these or just really want to make sure you get it right on a test, you make a number line and you start plotting the points. So 7 is out at +7, -5, okay, 9 is out here, -10, and then -2. So you plot those points. Now to order them, you just start on the left side and go to the right. So you have -10, -5, -2, 7, and 9. Okay. Same thing here with a little bit bigger numbers. Now you can make your number line. Here they went by 5s. You can make it go by 10s, whatever you want. So they go by 5s. They label every 10. And again, they just plot the points. 0, -25, 45, 30, or sorry, -50 and 30. And then to order them, you just go left to right. Okay, -50 is the smallest, and -25, 0, 30, and 45. Okay, so I think that should be a review. Okay, nothing too new there. Absolute value. Absolute value is based in the math definition is the distance between a number and 0 on a number line. In actuality, what you're doing is absolute value, you're basically just making that value positive. Okay, because the distance from 0 is going to be positive. The way they designate wanting you to find absolute values, they put these 2 lines on each side. Okay, so here a type of a word problem that you could see: a seagull is flying at altitude 107 feet, and a shark is swimming at a depth of 100 or -112 feet relative to sea level. Which animal is farther from sea level? So it doesn't say above or below; it just says farther from. So you just want the distance. Okay, so the absolute value of 107 or 107 is 107. Absolute value of -112 is just 112. So the absolute value of a number is just always going to be the positive version of that number. Okay. Opposite is similar but different. Okay. If they want you to find the opposite of the number, you just change the sign. So if it is positive, you make it negative. If it's negative, you make it positive. Now this one's a little tricky. They want you to find the opposite of an absolute value. So first of all, you do the absolute value. So the absolute value of a -8 is a +8. And then the opposite of that, because now we need to find the opposite, is a -8. So that's a little tricky one. Just pay attention on that when you're doing them, and we'll look at it as an example. So down here, the directions are write the opposite and the absolute value of an integer. Now, if you don't label these and the directions say find the opposite and the absolute value, I'm going to assume the first number you write down is the opposite, the second one's the absolute value, because that's the way that is in the directions. Now, what you could do in a problem like this is you could write, so if we have -1, the opposite of -1 is a +1. And the absolute value, you could use AV, absolute value of 1. So if we put those two bars on the side, you make it positive. So in this case, they're both the same answer. Okay. Now, when your original number is positive, you won't have the same answer because the opposite of 105 is -105. But the absolute value of 105 is just positive, and you get 105. Okay. Number 5 is the same way here. Number 8, if you have 18, the opposite's -18. Absolute value, you keep it positive, it's 18. So now this one is a tricky one. So what we're going to do first, before we find the opposite and the absolute value of this, we got to find what the absolute value of this number is. So now we have 60. Now asking for the opposite and absolute value. So the opposite of it is -60. And the absolute value of it just stays 60. Okay. So that's it for 2.1 in the note-taking guide. If you go to the study guide, again, this will probably, if you do the study guide and practice this, you'll probably have everything you need to know. Okay, so let's go to the beginning here. They have, just like in the note-taking guide, ordering. So just for practice, if you do these and check your answers in the back, if you got those down, you'd be good for the test for that part. Finding the absolute value. Again, they just have a word problem here, and they're basically saying, I won't read through the whole thing, take your time, but there's two values, and the bigger the number, bigger the absolute value, the stronger the number is, and so they have a -2.75 or a 0.25. So you find the absolute value of both, so the stronger would be the -2.75 because the absolute value is higher. Okay. Then they have the find the opposite questions. Okay, if you can do those. Now some of these you actually have to find the absolute value first and then do the opposite. So they're doing two things. Okay. And then here, we didn't do any of these on the other page, but it says copy and complete the statement with a less than or greater than. So maybe I'll do one of these here. The ones that are the hardest for people to understand, like number 11, you guys know this. You have a positive number, you have a negative number. It's always going to open towards a bigger number, and you know the positive number is bigger than a negative number, no matter what the values are. Okay, any positive number is bigger than any negative number. The ones that can get confusing for people are ones like number 12. Okay, so you have a -11 and a -6. So you need to think about which is farther. You could either think the smaller one is the one farther left on the number line, or the bigger one is the one more right. Now, -6 is close, since they're both negative, -6 is closer to 0. So that's the one that's farther right. That's going to be bigger. Or -11 is the one farther left. So even if you need to do a little graph like this and say, well, 0 is here, -6 is there, so -11 would have to be over here. And you can see, oh, -11's here, it's smaller. So that should be it points to that one, opens towards a bigger one. Okay. So if you can do those in the study guide, you're pretty good for the test. Again, there's extra credit, different types of numbers here, but a lot of the same type. The ones that are a little harder would be this section right here. Maybe I'll make up another one here. So what they're getting at in here is, now I said if you take an absolute value of a number, it's always positive. Now, what you have to be careful is if they put a negative on the outside, and let's say we had something like this. So we have negative or opposite of the absolute value of a -6. So we have a negative that stays here. Then we take the absolute value of a -6 is 6. And so then we actually have a -6 for an answer because this negative is on the outside. Okay. So also know the difference between absolute value sign, and if we just had parentheses, if we had this is different. There's nothing we have to do with this inside here. They just want the negative of this, or the opposite. This means the opposite of this. So if this is negative and we have another negative outside, that would be positive. So that will kind of help you with these problems in here if you do this for the extra credit. Okay, this might be a good chance to get some easy extra credit because this isn't a very hard page to do. Okay, so again, if you decide to do that for extra credit, make sure you send me a picture, okay, and then I'll give you extra credit for that. Okay, all right, that is it for 2.1. If you have any questions, let me know.